Welcome everybody, and it's a good thing it gets recorded. It's just been a crazy day, so please always ask lots of questions, and do remember to take care of yourself. So if something gets activated or triggered, make sure that you do some self-care and look after yourself. So okay, so today is about power of the mind, and also we're going to wrap up with how to build your daily practice. One of the things is that I wanted to talk about is that you're not your brain. And I know you've got a handout there, but I do want to talk about this part first. Let's see here. Okay, so you are not your brain. What does that mean? And a lot of times we think that we are our brains or that our thoughts are all about us or who we are. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that might be different. And in some practices, we call it the observer. However, what we're also talking about is there's a difference of your essence, and some of us call that the soul. Some of us, you might just say, well, that's just me. It doesn't really matter on the language. However, there is one thing, is that the brain is an organ. So it was the first organ formed, and we can guess, or I'm going to ask you to guess, as to what does your brain do? What is the main function of your brain? So I'm just going to, if you want to raise your hand or put it in the chat, or if you want to answer it, Nathan or Anita.
Is it to keep you alive?
Absolutely, it is. And it is the Grand Central Computer Station. And we're going to talk a little bit about um, that later, in how many megabits of information our brain processes all the time without us being directly involved. Um, so when the brain started, when it was forming, it began to collect data, information. The other thing that it did as it was forming, my earbud's not staying in, it also started to create memories. It started to create reactions and actions. And not every reaction is a bad one. So, right now, if you were walking upstairs, your brain automatically steps up. You're not physically and consciously thinking, unless you've stopped and done it as a meditation, that um, that action, you're not thinking about your muscles or how you're walking up the stairs. The other example of a reaction is something hot. We learn very quickly to pull our hands away or our body away when something is extremely hot. So the brain has continued to collect data for actions, reactions, memories. We talked a lot about belief systems, and the brain has collected that as well. And we talked about how we've adapted and adopted different belief systems. So we did that in a previous session. So our brain does a lot of things that we don't even think about. I mean, our heart pumps, we digest food. There's lots of things that our brain does that even right now, that we're not really thinking about, except listening to the Zoom, I think. So then the brain is also affected by a lot of substances. And we did talk about that too. Very early on, we talked about how the brain sends signals to our body of anxiety when we're dehydrated. So that is a thing. Our brain sends signals of lots of things like hunger and pain. Also, a lot of substances affect the brain, which we talked about in our first session. Caffeine, alcohol, drugs, and things like sugars, even hormones, all affect the brain. And, it's not really, it affects us. However, it isn't us. So, does that make sense? I'm going to just take a little pause if people have questions or want me to talk a little bit more about that, flesh it out. Seems okay? Okay, I'll keep going. So, again, what I also wanted to show you, and I've got a diagram here, so I'm going to just switch over. Um, there. Oh, good. I moved it earlier and I was worried that I didn't have it straight. So another thing that the brain does, and this doesn't mean this is your personal brain, but this is a possibility. So the brain, um, it will have little traumas, it will have big traumas. So that's what little T's are, big T's. And so a little T is falling off a bicycle or getting stitches, maybe somebody accusing you of something or getting yelled at. That could be a little T. So a big T, of course, is catastrophic. And usually we think um, of that affecting trauma and or being traumatic is a catastrophic, and so that could be a loss of a loved one or witnessing some violence or experiencing that or losing your home. Those are some examples of big T's. So the other thing that happens though is the brain doesn't always differentiate between little t's and big T's. So I'm not trying to alarm anybody here. Your brain naturally is equipped to process trauma. And that's why, if people have had traumatic events, that we watch them closely. And that's why, even with grief counseling, we wait for the 3 months, about 2 to 4 months, 3 months, that kind of time period, because the brain has the capacity to process trauma. And if it's not processing trauma, it's trapping it somehow. So that's what we've got to be aware of. That, and that's why some of these courses, they're so good, art therapy, because it does help process and move the trauma, which the brain is equipped to do. However, sometimes, and the reason I want to talk about this, there is a purpose here, is if the brain hasn't processed the traumas, whether they're little t's or big t's, if the brain has a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, it's possible that this space becomes larger than the joy space. And so, what happens, and the way I would describe this, whoops, hang on here, I've got technical stuff going on. It's a challenge today. I'm being challenged technically. Anyways, so what happens is, and we end up with what I call, and it's not just me, there it is a name, is a trauma highway. And so what happens is an event could happen, and it doesn't have to be a negative event. However, we experience it and then get hijacked into a trauma highway, because that's the main neural pathway to the brain. So this is just something to consider, is if something is happening, let's say, a friend may be graduating, or perhaps somebody won an award, or maybe you're invited to some special event. And initially you might get excited about it. However, when the brain starts to process it, it goes into this neural pathway, and instead of being excited, the brain then starts saying, oh, I've got to deal with this in a different way. So there might be sleeplessness or some kind of reaction, perhaps numbing out or um, getting sleepy or the opposite, hungry or angry or impatient, whatever these coping strategies are. And you might be sitting back and going, well, why am I not going over here to this place? And the neural pathways just aren't as big going to the joy space. Now, the good news is, of course, we can change this, and that's why I wanted to show the illustration. So before, again, it's a kind of a big thing. Any questions? So I'm just going to pause if there's any questions or comments even about that.
I excuse me. I have kind of a comment slash question. Um, so if you have like for example, with our current situation with COVID, um, could that be something that would activate that sort of reactive sort of neural pathway, even if nothing's happened? But could it um
Accentuated?
yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So okay. I'm not good at writing upside down, so I'll just put the C there. Yeah. Like in our brains, it might not be this type of ratio. So I just kind of did this to illustrate it. However, let's say the ratio, let me get the red marker. Hang on here. Maybe the ratio is smaller, right? And maybe the joy space, it's bigger. And that's okay. I mean, it's an illustration, but yes. So when I've always said, like, what happened in 2020 and what's happening now, it's almost like we're all carrying another sack of potatoes. It's like this has made it all bigger. And we've had to, like, simple tasks aren't so simple anymore, as we all know. So even I'm going to just use grocery shopping. It's not easy anymore. We daren't forget something and make that extra trip. I mean, it's just one of those things where we're planning differently and acting differently. And yeah, so this makes this bigger. And so, maybe 2020 added a few more lanes, and maybe you didn't have, you may not have had many lanes going to this area, but certainly what happened will add to that. And so is that answering the question?
Yeah, I'm curious, and I think there's a similar question as well in the comments. Is so if we're looking forward to something, or if something is, like is a joyful event or something we're looking forward to, why would we go to sort of the more anxiety, worrying type response or reaction, as opposed to um, you know um, our joy or happiness about something that's supposed to be a good thing. So
Right.
it sort of makes us switch to that other.
Well, it's actually, again, this is a brain thing. So that's a great question, Anita, and I'm hoping I'm answering it. I'm not watching the chat, but you said it came up. So what happens? This is a neural pathway that your brain has created. So let's say, and here's the thing I want to interject too, is that we can certainly change this, and that's where I want to go with this. So what happens is when we've had trauma, and you may not have as many pathways, maybe you've only got, that many, there's not that many, but because of what's happened in 2020, it added a few more lanes. And So it's not that we choose it. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that your brain takes you here. So it's just something to be aware of. And if it doesn't happen, so here's the thing. So if there is something joyful happening and you actually do feel joy, well, just be rest assured that your joy space is probably balanced or much larger than this space. It's only if this space is bigger than the joy space that we get hijacked. Does that help in the explanation?
Hmm.
And it's the brain doing it, not us. And that's why I want to talk about it, because it's something to be really aware of. And I'll just do a little personal disclosure, is that in 204 I had two, I'd say, fairly serious car accidents, back to back. They were very close together, and they were on the same side both times, where my daughter was sitting in the passenger in the back. So the trauma from that, I certainly had these pathways, and it was really interesting that when good things happened, I noticed them and then quickly filed them. My brain wasn't going to stay in the joy space; it just got hijacked to here, and so it's just something to be aware of. If it's not happening, then don't worry. And we will talk about how to make the joy space bigger. And yeah, so it's just something to be aware of. So
It also related to the fact that our brains are basically organized in the past.
yeah,
So through early life or earlier experiences, and sometimes when we are reactive, it's really the reaction is coming out of the past, not so much in the present.
right.
Something in the present is perhaps reminding our brains of anxieties from the past.
Yeah. How to get past that? Again, it's about awareness, and I'll just go back to the document here, the drawing. So one of the things we want to do is we want to grow this space, the joy space. And you know what? We want to grow it anyways. I think that's what this the workshop's been about. And I mean, I showed the extreme more so as an illustration. And we want to let this grow over. And so one of the things that we can do, and we've talked about it in this workshop, in all these sessions, is about how to be resilient. So these are the things that we can do, and I'm just going to review a few of them, and they're good practices. So sharing happy events and sharing happy memories. So let's say there is something that has happened to you that's been really wonderful. You may think, oh, you know what? I really haven't really told a lot of people. So it's an opportunity to share these happy events or happiness that you've experienced. That helps grow the joy space, because the mind then goes, oh yeah, that's something that we can think about. Um, so sharing happy events, sharing happy memories, that's really, really important. And probably doing it to a few people, or sharing with a few people, I should say. Practicing gratitude, which we talked about in a previous session. And it's, again, it's training your brain. So it's not getting angry at your brain. It's more just understanding it and becoming the the CEO of your brain, or the boss of your brain, however you want to say that. And not to be angry with your brain, but to partner with your brain, and understanding that your brain is collecting data. So let's give it data that will expand the joy space. Because what we want to do, our goal is that we want to grow these neural pathways, and we want to let these kind of grow over, and not take over so much, so that when an event happens, And I'm making a circle because this event, we don't know. With some people, it could be a happy event, maybe it's not. But that when you do experience it, then you can go, oh, hey, this is a good thing, and go to your joy space. If it's something you need to deal with or work with, then you go to this place and you use your strategy. So we want to be at this place where we can make the decision of where we go. Um, and how we experience it. So here's some other things that you can do by growing your joy spaces. Blessing people. A lot of times we bless people when they sneeze, but we don't always bless them. Um, and it's just something, if somebody smiles at you, or the cashier has done an extra special job, is just bless her, bless him or her. Um, or when you're happy about somebody maybe held open the door, and even if you don't say it out loud, you can do that in your heart, and is blessing people. It's a lovely thing to do, and it's a little bit different than it's still being grateful, but blessing them um, is also quite nice. And thinking and practicing your affirmations, which we talked about in one session, that's really important. And we're going to go back to why that's important with that handout. And random acts of kindness also expands our joy space. Doing things you enjoy, meditating. And again, these are things that we have been doing. So there are things that will help you grow that space. And it really is too about being aware. And those are things we've talked about too in all of this, is the more that we're aware, the more we can make changes. So that's why, again, why I drew this out. I didn't want to worry anybody or create concern or anything like that. It's just good to be aware of. And and we talked about feeding all four and being balanced, so we want to maintain that. Um and we deserve to thrive in our lives. We live a miracle, so how can we do that, right? And these are some of the things we can do. The other thing is to exercise, which does produce endorphins, the feel good hormones. Definitely will grow that joy space. So, let me see. I just want to make sure we've covered things. Any questions, comments about that?
Yeah. There's a small question in the chat about
Okay.
perhaps how to grow over the pathways of trauma.
Oh, yes. Well, okay. So what happens is a neural pathway, and that's a great question because it reminds me of a metaphor that I'd like to share with you. And we've talked about this, is when we create a new path. It's like walking through a field, and as we walk through that field more and more, that path becomes more pronounced. And what I liken this to be, if we have what I used to have a 12-lane highway, fully maintained, plowed. So to me, it was like a machete. And it's interesting. And I want to encourage you, whoever asked that question, is it's not so easy all the time to let this grow over. What we really want to do is this, when we, let's say, start remembering happy things, we might not always get to here right away. We might still get hijacked. So we want to keep doing those habits. And we're going to talk about that. I think too, we talked a little bit about it when we addressed the affirmations and the mantras, and that's a way of retraining the brain. And so what happens is this pathway doesn't get used as much, and it starts to, I use the metaphor, grow over. it starts to break apart. And so it's not as strong anymore. And this pathway here, because we're being conscious, we're growing that space, and we're growing these pathways and making them stronger. And so that's how this becomes overgrown. So did I answer that okay?
I think you did. Um, but we have actually a follow. What if you're in the middle of a bunch of continual trauma?
Well, yeah, that's where you want to make sure you've got support. So, if there is a lot of trauma in your life, um, make sure you've got support. We're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to do this together. So, if you need help with a coach or a therapist, absolutely, and a social worker. Do you, Anita, call yourself, I don't, would you call yourself a therapist or a counselor? I don't know the proper name, so I want to make sure
Mhm.
that I include that.
Well, I'm working towards that. Yes, that's part of why I'm getting my MSW. But I certainly do some counseling through the hospice at the moment. But yeah, at the moment, I'm would just be referred to as a social worker until I have my designation.
Yeah, so then I would say counselor, right? Like that would be correct.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's really important to get support, and even a mentor, coach. I mean, just because too, as a therapist myself, I have support. I have supervision. I have peer supervision. I also have my mentors. I have people I can call to support me. So if someone was saying if you're in the middle of it, yes, absolutely get support to help you process and help you heal and cope um, with that.
And also, Elka, the same person um, wondered, so if they increase their joy, does it decrease the pathway to trauma? And I had responded by saying it becomes more likely that you recognize the difference and you're able to sort of switch to a different neural pathway just by starting to notice when perhaps your brain is taking you down that sort of more reactive road.
Yeah,
Sometimes as you develop the other pathways a little bit more, you can almost become aware and then, maybe use some of the techniques that you've been developing to create the joy in your life. So I don't know.
absolutely.
That,
Absolutely. And it's like that metaphor. I think we talked about it last week, and we used the feed all four, and we used it as four tires on a car. And so when life does what life does, which that life is chaotic. I mean, we're in a chaotic universe. It's just going to happen. So the more resilient we are, and resilience, oh, I'm pointing at that thing. I always forget. The more resilient we are, the stronger we're going to be to cope with what's ever going on here. And Anita, you're right, because we'll be able to recognize and be aware, and then we can choose how we move forward or support ourselves, whether that's going to a therapist or whether it's to use the strategies. I mean, sometimes the strategies are enough. And I think that's, it's a great segue to why a daily practice is so important, is that the more we feed ourselves, the more that we're balanced and aware, yes, we can certainly make those changes. So I hope that helps.
so there's another question
Yep.
from a panelist or an attendee, which is how do we build resiliency?
Well, I'm hoping in the last 9 sessions and for today, I think we've given a lot of practice and a lot of ideas, and not and you know what, not every idea is going to work for you, and I'm sure there's more ideas out there. Is to practice the strategies, is that's how we're going to build resilience. One of the first ones that we talked about was the 0 to 10 scale. And I think it was also a few sessions in, we talked about the yes, no, maybe. Those are really, really powerful strategies, because when we listen to our body, and there's our brain right inside our body, is going to give us the information that we need. And it's so individualistic. Each body is an individual and is different. And so when we notice, first we need to notice our yes, no, maybe places. We need to notice our 0 to 10 scale. And that's why checking in is so important. And actually, I have that in as one of the things for to do in our daily practice. And so then what happens is we naturally start going to the yes place, to our happy place, because it's natural to feel good. That's what we want to do as humans, and our bodies will gravitate we to that place. So we just need to be aware of that. And I think that I know some of the exercises um, we didn't spend a lot of time in because of the hour session. However, doing these things on a regular basis does bring and build awareness, and that's what we want to do. And as I said at the beginning, one of the things we want to do is be aware, and the other thing is to practice. Life is practice. So if those are two words that you get from these sessions, is awareness and practice. And that's where we're going to build our resilience.
And I think also when um if a person reflects on their life and on different events in their life, and um perhaps, looking back and where they are now, you might recognize um how often you have been resilient. And then if you sort of um look at that, you can even see that you're more resilient than you realize, and build on some of the things you may have done in the past. And again, that feeds your brain with information that actually um, you innately are resilient. And I think it can also sort of build up those other neural pathways as well. Um,
Yeah. And it is practice and it is repetition. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well today. It takes some time sometimes. Especially, I think that's when we talked about, and this is what I love. I'm so happy that we've been recording these. When we go back and look at the belief systems, we learn those. They're not a right or wrong. However, our belief systems do influence how our brain perceives things, and understanding our perceptions. That's when we can make some changes as well. So as much as like there's still, I think with all of the work that we've done in these sessions, there's hours of exploration to continue. And just know that we do that. And I'm sure, Anita, you do too. And I have a strong daily practice. I've been doing it for a long time, and I intend to keep doing it the rest of my life. And it does make me more resilient, and I've noticed that. And I don't wake up every day dancing out of the bed and singing. I mean, however, I have my strategies that I can go to and unpack what I need to unpack. And if I can't do it by myself, then I go out and I get help to do that. So, and that's okay. And just knowing that we're meant to do this together. We're not meant to do it all by ourselves.
Yeah, and
So,
I think that's a really important point as well, Elka, because there's a saying that healing happens in relationship.
right.
So, and often we're kind of conditioned to think it's a weakness to reach out to others for support. But I think that's a myth or a falsehood because
Right.
as we're seeing now in this climate of COVID restrictions, like we really need we need those connections we have with others, even if it's with a friend or if it's with a professional or a counselor, same thing. But yeah, I think that's a really important point that sometimes, like the one uh, participant asked, what if you're dealing with a lot of traumas, if you're able to lean on someone or get professional support in time, it may be that you need that less, but it helps you sort of through that, more difficult um, period. And you build up those strategies and you sort of build up those other neural pathways. And then you'll find in time, you can just use your strategies on your own more than
Yeah.
in a relationship. But I just think it's something that is absolutely no shame in needing or turning to.
Right. And it's important that you're right. And we're meant to do this together, and there is no shame in it. Um, and yeah, you're right.
And before we get too far forward, there is an attendee that'd like to perhaps join in, ask a question, or add a comment. So, can we take a moment and do that?
Yep.
Okay, beautiful.
Hi.
Hello.
Um, about the support idea, which I completely and totally agree with and have no shame in getting support, and that's why I'm here. But for me, there's an intensity of multiple issues going on. So it's been going on, unfortunately, for about 6 months. And I'm starting to get worried that my friends are perhaps getting weary, and I'm wondering if I should cut back on how much I've been relying on them.
I don't know. I mean, you can only ask your friends, right? And be honest with them and just say, do you have time for me today? And be specific and say, I need 30 minutes or I need an hour, and let them give you an answer. And, if they say sure, or if they say tomorrow is better, or I only have 15 minutes, that's okay. And you go on from there.
Yeah, I absolutely give them time, to say no, but a lot of these people are too kind to, I mean, they may say call tomorrow, but I'm just worried that hearing about small progressions in the same problems become wearisome.
Well,
I'm not
yeah, I can't speak for your friends, and you've got to trust them to give you honest answers, um, and leave it at that. To worry about it and not to really know or assume, um, would just cause grief. And if you've asked them and they're okay with it, then trust that.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay.
And
So,
actually,
oh,
sorry,
yep.
yeah, perhaps even to tail on that, is it okay even to look for support from strangers?
Well, again, it's a comfort zone for sure. And the other thing too, I think I saw, sometimes we don't have resources to go to. I know that now there was a drop-in center. We do have a lot of resources coming across our desk. And I think, Anita, you've been collecting a lot of resources. There are resources in our community that don't cost money. And there are courses, they're doing virtual courses. So the Muskoka Parry Sound Mental Health, that would be a good resource because they run courses all the time and they network with other affiliations, and they run courses. And it's something that, you know, if you're feeling that you need something more, contact them. And even if you're not in our district, they'll help you. They're just like that. They're very helpful people. And, you know, it doesn't matter where you live. There are resources out there and groups going. And so, yeah, maybe initially a group like that might be new people. So they may be strangers. I think it's really your comfort zone. If you feel comfortable, sure. But trust yourself. You know, always go with yourself first and trust that.
Yeah, and
So,
Hospice Palliative Care Ontario also, I just received an email today from Hospice Muskoka, and they're offering quite a few virtual sessions as well, like daily and weekly, and not just psychoeducational um, sessions, but also like even um, armchair yoga and a dance hour, and so things that are fun. They're being creative, so um, there is actually quite a bit of support being um, put out there virtually at the moment as well.
yeah,
And
yeah, I've noticed that too. So, the best is reach out, you know, reach out to Anita, reach out to hospice, reach out to the Muskoka Perry Sound Mental Health. Um, you know, you can check websites. Uh, I guess we have a Facebook page still going. So all those things can be put out there. So I'd like to carry on if I can with the handout and then with building a daily practice if that's okay.
I think so.
Okay. So looking at the handout, and I know we talked a little bit about this when we were doing our affirmations. And so here's where we can work again with the brain and be, like I said, be the boss of your brain, however you want to call that, and partner with your brain. So don't be angry at it. And if you're noticing different reactions or you're noticing some unpleasantness, you know, it's an opportunity to make some changes and help your brain out. And again, you know, maybe it's a thinking a strategy that needs to change, or perhaps maybe it's some action that needs to happen. So um, you know, thinking about that. And the conscious mind, so this is the mind that, you know, you and I are talking with each other. That's our conscious mind. We have limited processing capacity, short term memory at the moment. So, you know, the last 20 seconds, which is kind of funny, but if we had to recall everything verbatim, you know, we kind of would get stuck or stalemate. We can only manage 1 to 3 things at a time consciously. And our impulses, this is interesting, they go 120 to 140 miles per hour. And then we only have the ability to process, and this is consciously, the average of 2,000 bits of information per second. So, the interesting part, this always fascinates me, is that we can make a conscious decision. So, we can, with our mind right now, we can choose to change the content of our subconscious mind. So, that is really interesting. And that is some cool bit of science, I think. So, and I got this, and you know what? I was remiss in not giving you the resource for that. And it came out of the book Law of Attraction by Jack Canfield. So he did a tiny little book. And so if you want that resource, maybe maybe remind me tomorrow, Anita or Nathan, so I can get that proper resource. I should have put it at the bottom of the piece of paper. So the subconscious mind has a much expanded processing capacity and has the long-term memory. So this is your brain that we're talking about. It's an incredible computer, and it has the ability to manage thousands of events at every second. So heartbeat, cellular activity, digestion, all kinds of things that our brain is doing simultaneously all at once, which is pretty cool. The impulses travel, this is really crazy, I think, 100,000 miles per hour. And it has the ability to process an average of 4 billion bits of information per second, which is just boggling, really. And so that's our brain. So we can actually influence this. So I want to give you some other data, and I'm not sure if I don't think we talked about it before, but I think we did mention a little bit about changing a habit, and we've learned that it's in 28 days or 30 days. Well, that's not really true. And so Philippa Lawley did a study, and she said it's about 18 days to 168 days to change a habit, depending what it is. And this is why we need to be determined and persistent with our affirmations, with our goals, with our intentions of what we want to do, and our desires on how we want to continue in our life. So it's important to continue and not give up, and that's what that practice is about. And I want to put in there, make your practice fun. So you're more apt to do it if it's fun. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that might look like. John Gray, another author, and he's the one actually that got me started on pursuing why 30 days wasn't enough. And he was the author. What made him famous was women are from Venus and men are from Mars. He wrote that. Though a lot of people don't know that he used to be a monk. He was a monk for 7 years. He's written some phenomenal books about the human process. Anyways, what I did read in one of his books was he said the brain needs to hear a concept 200 times before it actually really accepts it, and 150 if you're a genius. And so what he meant by that, it wasn't that, you and I, we may understand something, but maybe we want to make a change. And so if we want to change a belief system that's been part of the brain, perhaps we want to make some changes in our subconscious. What I got out of that is we've got to be patient and persistent. So not to give up, to be patient, and just know it takes time, and that's okay. Life is practice. And I feel like I'm living proof of that. I've been practicing a lot of these things for a lot of years, and I have to say, every month, every year, I feel better and better, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's surprising sometimes. So, building a daily practice. And we did talk about feed all four. So we want to make sure that we feed all 4 areas. So here are some things that you can do to build your daily practice is perhaps you may enjoy making a chart. And at the beginning, that could be a good thing. Or you may enjoy your chart and modify your chart. And on it, you want to put activities that support you in the 4 areas. And these activities could be anything that gives you joy. Journaling the way you want to journal, collage, a cup of tea, reading your affirmations, reading inspirational sayings, and inspirational books, or watching inspirational YouTubes, or even it could be inspirational movies, that are based on real life. So, choosing what builds you up, what gives you inspiration and passion and excitement for life. Perhaps it's a walk. I don't know if everybody saw these huge flakes that were coming down today in the sunshine. It was just so gorgeous. And it didn't last long because it clouded over. Then it just looked so beautiful. It could be playing with your pets, could be inspirational. And this deep snow, I'm having a lot of fun with my dog. He just loves to pounce in it. And when he jumps, he gets buried. He's gone. He's in the snow. But it gives him great pleasure, which gives me great pleasure. Um, Remember to check in. Is that part of your chart, or is that something you can do as your daily practice? Is checking in, is it a habit you want to start when you wake up? Where are you at? Like, what's going on inside your body? Is it a number? Like, does that feel good to go 0 to 10? Where are you at? Or is it that niggly feeling that you're not quite ready to do your gratitude journal? Something's bothering you. You wake up with some thoughts, or maybe you woke up in the middle of the night with a worry or a thought that has been concerning you, and that could take some journaling. So knowing where you're at, being aware, listening to yourself. And again, I keep writing down, being aware who you are, and where you are and what's going on in your life. Some of you said you've got lots going on, is knowing that. And, sometimes and eventually these things will pass, but maybe right now it's a heavy plate or a heavy burden, that you're going through, and it's just real stuff that's really hard to cope with. And how are you going to do that, and what does that look like? um, Sitting with your discomfort. And one of my mentors, dear mentors, said that he always welcomed discomfort. I didn't agree, but I understand it. And it's a place of learning, is when we're uncomfortable, when we're, disgruntled, or feeling niggles, or that unrest. That's a place of learning. That's a place of exploration. It's a place of opportunity. So when you feel that, how can you turn that around instead of I don't know how to say it, is staying in that place of whether it's sorrow or anger, or instead is go, okay, I feel that, feel it, acknowledge it. So it's not about bearing it or denying it. However, feel it, be in it. And then once you're in it, then say, okay, what's next? What is the opportunity here? What's the learning here? And that it does so much. It processes, it transcends, it also becomes gold. Yeah, that's our growth. And when we're happy and relaxed, actually, when we're happy, we can relax. Then we don't have to do this work. So know that, when you're having a good time or you're relaxed, that you've got some peace. Be curious. How can you be curious with unknown and mystery and doubts? How can you be curious about these things? Because Jack Canfield, I'll quote him. He said, you know what is all we've got? We're like a car. There's the car metaphor again. And he said, it's like we have headlights in the dark and they light up our path. However, not the whole path. And that's kind of how life is after the headlights. We don't know what there is until we travel that way. So, how can we be with that? And that's a question. How can we be curious with that mystery? And it is a mystery. Know your limits. What are your limits? Your physical limits. Whether you're sleeping enough, whether you're getting enough nutrition or the right nutrition. What are your limits with stress? And we're all different. We're all different. So, what is it for you? What are your limits? That's really important. Know what's on your plate. And like we talked about it in the beginning, is, sometimes reality can be pretty heavy. So knowing what that is, it doesn't mean that you're not coping well. It just means maybe reality is heavy. And what strategies do you need? Looking over whether you've got You've gotten lots of strategies in these sessions. There's lots of resources. Where do you go next? Is like Anita was saying, as we practice our strategies, as we build ourselves up, and we're actually teaching the brain that we can go a different route, we can go a different pathway, we can choose. And if we need more, we can do that too. We can reach out. And because, you know, we don't all have the same perspective, which is wonderful. And it's that collective wisdom that makes it pretty great. Um, so just in ending, it's practice. I'll say that over and over again. And to be aware of who you are, what you're going through, and be patient, be kind with yourself, and know life is practice. We're all just practicing.
That's
So
beautiful.
thanks, Nathan. And we do have a few minutes, so.
Just because I'm aware of the time, and before
Yep.
you wrap up, Alka, I just wanted to once again thank our sponsor, United Way Muskoka, Simcoe United Way Muskoka.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Yay.